Hi, good evening. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for the Heritage Project, the Afro-Latinx Music Experience. My name is Nicole R. Smith, and I am the Manager of Volunteer and Internship Services and a proud member of the Heritage Committee here at the Arsht Center. The Heritage Committee is committed to giving a voice to and shining a light on the trials, but more importantly, the triumphs of the diaspora experience. For those of you who would like to use captioning, the link is in the chat, and it was also sent out to you in your reminder email. As an Afro-Latina myself, I would like to take the time to thank the Arsht Center and the Heritage Committee for giving a voice to the diaspora, for deeming this conversation importante, important enough to have. Never in my wildest dreams would I ever have thought in my lifetime that we would be having this discussion on a platform like this outside of my own community. And I couldn't think of a better way to show honor to my Panamanian father on today, his 75th birthday. Feliz cumpleaños. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our moderator for the evening, the charismatic, the glamorous and dynamic Deborah Magdalena.
Do I disappoint? She said glamorous. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Good evening, and welcome to our amazing chat. Like, I am so excited about this evening that I actually have butterflies in my stomach. I'm actually nervous. That's how excited I am. I took the liberty to take out some of my vinyl collection, and I have my parents here. That's in the famous Chateau Madrid in New York. And I'm just really excited to share this space, this virtual space with this prestigious panel. We are going to be talking about the Afro-Latinx experience, the music experience. And for some of you that may not know, in the United States now, we all need some kind of labeling, but really what it is, it's not a labeling, it's more of a definition that speaks to the history of Latin Americans that really have a significant amount of African heritage. Right? It wasn't just the United States that was colonized, it was also Latin America and the Caribbean and so on and so forth. And so between our Indian ancestors, our African ancestors, the European ancestors, we are just this melting pot of Afro-Latinx. Okay, and so my goal for this chat is for us to explore the history, the present, and the future of what it is to be an Afro-Latinx artist and our music. So without further ado, let's get this party started. And I'd like to introduce to you the very first, I'm fanning out. She's so fabulous. She is a singer, a pianist, classically trained pianist, a composer, an actress, a Grammy and a Latin Grammy winner. Una diva, una diosa. She's known as la Sonora del Mundo. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, at least a little finger snaps if you could just, I don't see you, but you could feel it, Aimee Nubiola. Fabuloso. La reina, la regia. Mira ese suéter. You see, she did not disappoint with the glasses and the sweater. Bienvenida. Welcome. Up next, it is another brilliant writer, composer, arranger. He's a secret poet on the DL. He doesn't want a lot of people to know, but he's a great poet. He also happens to have an absolutely brilliantly talented sister. I mean, he really is a lucky guy. He is a Latin winner as well, and many other awards. Please welcome Mr. Nestor Torres. Very good. Saludos, Nestor Torres. Let's see you. Now is when you turn on your camera and you turn on your microphones. Y Aimee, yo quiero oír tu voz, así que te puedes abrir el micrófono. You can go ahead. Absolutely.
I'm here.
So not least, you can put your camera on, Nestor. The whole world wants to see.
Actually, in fact, I'm trying to, but it says you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it.
Okay, that's okay. That's going to be fixed and not a worry. So just keep it open. Last but not least is also a dear friend of mine, and you know, she's become a really staple voice for what it is to be a part of the whole Afro-Latinx experience. And she's a scholar, a visual and performing arts. She's an award-winning director and a dear friend. Please welcome Omilani Alarcón. Vamos a ver, que yo se vas a tener de practicar. I know you, oh, there she is.
Hi, Maya.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Ay, que estoy tan emocionada. I'm so excited to be with you all and really, so I just want to get right to it. You know, in the beginning, I was talking about that we're going to explore today what it is to be an Afro-Latinx artist, right? The past, the present, and the future. So I'm curious, share with all of us first, and Aimee, we'll start with you. If you could possibly tell us, when was that moment in your life, ese momento en tu vida, you just knew that you were going to be an artist for the rest of your life? And that question is for all of us. We'll start with Aimee.
Well, hello to everybody, and I want to say thank you first for this invitation to this important, very important panel talking about the Afro-Latinx, and it's a privilege for me to be here. And I want to say sorry about my English, because my English is not very good looking.
I knew you were going to say that. For those of you that don't know this, you know, I didn't tell the history of these artists. You need to Google them because it's so extensive. But this beautiful woman played in a Colombian telenovela, La Vida de la Piel, and that's what I my English not very good looking.
Yes. Okay. Well, the moment in my life that I think that I will be an artist was when I was a child. Because in my house, in my home, my mother played piano, my father and my stepfather sing, my sister sing with me, we sing together like a duet. And I always think I want to be artist. I didn't know clearly, no? If pianist or singer or musician or ballerina, the ballet.
Oh my God.
But always I think I want to be
around it.
Yes.
Awesome. Master, when did you know? When was that moment for you?
Well, as you may be familiar with, because our father is a musician, I was always surrounded by music, and you know, a couple of cousins and I always played the pots and pans. And when I was 5, Santa Claus bought me a small drum set. It was a professional drum set, small as it was. And so music has always been part of my life. It's been very natural. And so I have always been a bit of an intellectual ever since I can remember. So I was going to be an astronomer, I was going to be a surgeon, I was going to be so many things. But then in middle school, I was able to attend Escuela Libre de Música in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. And I remember specifically, I was 14 years old. And I was coming out of a solfege, una clase de solfeo, or sight reading class. And because it's so natural to me, I had no problem with it. It was like, felt, gee, this is easy. And I was walking out of the solfege class and said, you know what? Yeah, this is easy. I'm going to be a musician because this is easy. Little did I know that a musician's profession is one of the most difficult, challenging vocations or professions there are, because of instability, because of the constant inner struggle or, you know, the contradiction of being creative and being sensible and sensitive as an artist, and then within the context of an artistic life or artistic endeavors, how ruthless and how difficult and challenging it really can be. So
artists, you know, we just do it for the love, right? It just comes from the heart, and we don't think about business right
until it hits you, and then it's very hard to hold on to that love. And that's part of the human experience, and I think part of what this whole diasporic experience as it is.
Omilani.
Hey, la latinegra mía, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Aimee. Hola, Nestor. Yeah, so happy to
Milani. Honored to have you with us.
For me, I come from a family of artists on both sides. And I feel like I was lucky that I got into arts very young. And a lot of people don't know, but I grew up in television. I grew up as a dancer. I grew up also with my own artistic career, but I took it for granted. And I thought everybody could just roll up to the radio station and get on there. So I had an identity crisis, and I wanted people to like me for me. So I decided I didn't want to be an artist anymore. So I had to find my voice, and I'm trying to redefine what that means now. And I realized I can't live without it when I got rid of my artistic career because I just wanted to be loved for being Omilani. Now I know I want you to love me for my art too.
Right, but now you're allowing us to see that process for you. We are still falling in love with Omilani, you know, and
Thank
we still
you.
remember having that conversation about Latinegras, and so it's really wonderful.
That's
and I
true.
want to encourage, please, you know, we're all artists, which means we're going to go on tangents and we're going to talk a whole lot. But please, feel free to type in some questions in the Q&A feature, because we are going to, I told my Arsht team, you've got to text me and make sure I stay on time. So we want to make sure that you can connect with these brilliant scholars, because they all are, the three of them are scholars in addition to being artists. So please feel free to put some questions in there. Now that we discovered and we heard that moment that it was for you, as brief as possible, and poetically, at that moment, and some of you were, you know, we were young at that moment. At that moment, how did you identify yourself? Meaning, were you la negra, la negrita, el negro, el mulato, el jabao? Were you black? Were you Latino? Were you Latina? Were you at that moment? Did you know where you were? You were still figuring out, or I'll start with you, Omilani.
Oh my gosh, why would you start with me? My story is a little complicated because my father is Filipino, and but he raised me to think that I look like Grace Jones, you know, like, so I really internally felt that I was undeniably Black. And my music was always conscious. So when I would go to do shows and do questions and answers, people would say stuff like, how can you talk about being Black when you're not Black yourself? And I never understood why people would say that, because I was raised to feel like I look like Grace Jones. So I always identified with Black and was proud of that.
Right, and so that's interesting. That was your first. That's why I'm asking this question. I know why I'm asking this question, right? So what about you, Aime? Ese momento.
Well, I always know about my race because in my home, my grandma was a mulata, like we say, mulata, but very, very, very clear, no brown.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and she told us, to my sister and I, about her origins, who was her father and her mother, and her father was white, and her mother was no sé qué, and all the mix, and all the complication ratios about my family. And my grandma said, do you see that? She's my cousin, but she's white, she's Oreo, she's what? And everybody said, wow. In my family, we have all races, China,
right.
Black, white, mulattoes, and no mulattoes, because in Cuba, everybody say, I am mulatto, I am not Black.
Right, there's always that confusion, right? Because we're, como dice, somos satos. We're so Nestor, what about you? Did you, when at that moment when you thought it was going to be easy at 14 years old, did you realize, or did you know, or how did you identify yourself?
At the time, I have never. It was not until much later, and to this day, I have to somehow make a point to identify myself as a Black person, because it's so natural. It's a given, you know. And
Yes.
I guess I have to, at least it's tempting to feel almost embarrassed to say that I don't think of myself as a Black person, or that was not a quote unquote issue for me. But my fortune, my particular destiny or karma was being born in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. I was very blessed that my grandfather, Conrado Forestier, was a very respected, very successful businessman and community leader in the town. And this is one of the interesting, the novelero aspect of the novela of the drama of our lives. Here we have a forestier, one of, actually at the time, the most distinguished forestier, which was actually an illegitimate son, because the forestiers were the very prominent, owners, landowners, Black landowners. And so my abuelo, my grandfather, happens to be one of the illegitimate ones, but he ended up to be the most respectable, the most decent one of them. So to being Black, it was not an issue whatsoever, because on Sundays after church, we just go to the Mayaguez Hilton, or we just have dinner anywhere. We were very free. And so it was not until later in my teens, when I moved to New York City, that, not only about Black or white, but about being a Jew and an Italian and an Irish, is the concept of being defined. Oh, this is the funniest one. The concept of being defined by either, you're either a Puerto Rican, a Black, or a Jew. Well, hello? Well, one is a nationality, the other one is a race, the other one is a religion. So that sense of identity based on color for me was not part of my early experience. Right. And in conclusion, because you did challenge us to be brief, very short. I think that it positions us, to me personally, at this particular time in history, as an artist and as an educator and someone aware as an agent of change, as I really would consider myself to be, it gives me a very interesting perspective, in that I'm able to be what is called in Japanese a chudo, or middle way, because I did not experience the oppression and the racism and the definition of who I am as a person, as a man, by race. I am able to be, more objective about it. So that's it.
Right. Awesome sauce. So it's interesting that you do bring that up, because I am that brilliant sister I was talking about earlier. And the same thing happened for me, because we were raised, it's what was considered Black, and it was considered normal in Puerto Rico, and also with our grand aunt Ruth Fernandez. So again, for me, I really did not realize or think about it until we moved to New York. And then I saw a video. And then when I saw this video, I realized subconsciously I always knew. So if you will indulge me, guys, ladies and gentlemen, tell me, what are the first thoughts that come to mind when you see this? So we're going to share with you a video. We're going to watch it together, and you're going to tell me what are the first thoughts that come to mind. What are your thoughts? I heard you, Aime, immediately. What were your thoughts?
¿Me puedes decir la pregunta otra vez, por favor?
Sí, mi vida. Sí, lo primero, cuando tú viste el video, dijiste, ay, la Lupe.
La Lupe.
La pregunta era, ¿cuál es el primer pensamiento?
Ya.
What's your first thought when you see that? What's your first thought?
Something complicated.
I'm sorry. It's true. I did set you up for that. I apologize. Yeah.
No, something complicated, La Lupe. La Lupe has a very, ¿cómo se dice? Auténtica, ¿no? Pero es una personalidad muy auténtica. Una manera de, the way that she sing and move and express herself is different to other artists including Cuba. I thought that she was something new that appeared in that years, in 60
yeah.
years? Yes. And she broke many rules in her behavior, in her appearance, in her performance. She was very interesting, because the people thought that La Lupe were some crazy.
Right.
Like
It's
that, no?
you know, it's so interesting when you said complicated and authentic, right? Such great words, right, Nestor? Complicated
Yes, yes,
and authentic. What were
yes.
your first or thought or word, or just when you saw that specific performance?
La Lupe, what I said is La Lupe. She was such a unique artist. And my thoughts are that, you know, truly unique, brilliant, impactful, you know, wearing her heart on his sleeve. What you saw is what you got. And she paid a price for being for being true to herself and to her art. She paid a price because, as I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult in this society, you know, to navigate being an artist within this very complex world, you know, complex being the operative word, and then being Afro-Latinx, you know, navigating one's own blackness within who we really are. So she paid a price, but she's fabulous.
Yeah, it's Oh, Milani, what were
You
your
know,
first thoughts?
same thing. Honestly, you know, like, cause we gotta be real. I felt a little something here because La Lupe, I mean, I'm a bit empathetic when I watch artists. She had some suffering, you know, and sometimes you can feel the pain, you know, like a lot of people go through things. Even like when I watch Billie Holiday and things like that, watching that for me was a bit painful. If you know something about La Lupe's story, you know, not just about her being fabulous and Afro-Latina, but she suffered, you know, and it's
So
hard
much.
to watch. So that's my feeling about it.
That's really interesting, Omilani. That's really interesting. I specifically chose that. I did a tribute for her a couple of years ago. So when I was doing research, I came across, this is when the David, oh my goodness, please forgive me. But I know it's like one of the first things that comes up on YouTube. That was not a Latino show. It was on an American show.
David Frost or?
No, it was another, oh my goodness, it's a David something. With a C? I know I'm going to kick myself. I should have known.
Cabot. Dick
Yes.
Cabot.
Yes.
Dick Cabot.
You know, and he was talking about how when the musicians were watching her, they were in awe of her, watching her as if she was, you know, Jimi Hendrix. And for me, when I said that subconsciously, I realized I always knew, it was like the fact that she chose to speak in tongue, music tongue. But that's our ancestors. Como que estaba montada. It was like she was, you know, in our class, you know, African American, we say in the churches, we talk about the Holy Spirit. You know, we talk about being possessed. And it's like, oh my God, this is, yeah, I may not be doing that. But when I am really feeling some kind of artistic joy, whatever, I just so connect. And so I was really curious to see if you guys ever had a moment like that where you feel que están poseídos.
Yes, it's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah.
I did a play in Miami a few years ago, and the name was La Lupe in 3 times.
Yeah.
And I was to reading and searching documents and image about her life, and I knew that she was sick, really sick. Yes. Yeah. And she was suffering that my Latinas, la negra, they say, because she was involved in something strange about religion practice and something like that. And she was a suffering woman because she had very sad, ¿cómo se dice? Niñez.
Sí, very sad childhood. She had a trauma.
Yes.
Yeah. Staying along with the lines of childhood, besides an image of like La Lupe and understanding La Lupe, were there any other Afro-Latino, Afro-Latinx musics, images, or influences that really played a really big role in your artistic path? I'll start with you, Milani.
I mean, for me, of course, Celia Cruz. There is a reason why every time we talk about Afro-Latinidad or Afro-Latinos in music, we mention her, she paved a big way, not just for being a woman, not just for being Black, you know, and I'm talking about pigmented Black, you know what I mean? Not just for those particular things, but for many years, for many generations, she was the only one. And also, see, this is another thing. A lot of people get romanticized with artists and they don't know what they suffer behind the scenes. For Celia Cruz's age, she had to fight for that, for all of the barriers. She broke more than race. That's what I'm saying. Like the barrier that she broke.
Yes.
I mean, imagine her being almost 80 years old singing La Negra tiene tumbao. You know, like she was almost 80. Yeah.
Yeah. What about for you, Nestor? Did you have any outside of our parent, you know, our dad and Titiru? Oh, you know what? Maybe it was Titiru. I'm not sure.
It was, I said, because you be specific, you're talking about a child. And I'm actually looking at the questions.
Actually, it
well,
could be time in your life.
Well, you know, definitely Ruth Fernandez being my great aunt. She was a great example of what a great artist. And she wore her negritude as a badge of honor. She capitalized, or not capitalized, but she owned it. And in fact, you know, I think it's important to mention that. And it's funny because I don't think in terms of it. I guess I'm part of that lineage. She was the first woman that walked through the entrance of the most exclusive, like a casino, like a very white, you know, place. When she played with a band called Mingo and his Hoopy Kids, you know, like a Count Basie of the time in Puerto Rico. She actually created a situation like Beyonce of the 30s, you know, got a friend to, you know, her very luxurious car and shared with all her jewelries. And she just walked with her head up high through the front entrance, something that was unheard of at the time. So she had an influence. This Black man is not a Latino, but he definitely was my major influence in my music as a flautist is Hubert Laws.
Right.
And interestingly, someone had mentioned something. I heard one response to some of the other panels about the focus on Afrocentricity as opposed to the contribution of European music, you know, to the culture. And Hubert Laws studied at Juilliard, and he, you know, very well classically trained artist, and he influenced me tremendously. So those two people, I would say, are the most important Black influences to speak
right.
of.
Now, I remember when I started out as an actress, I couldn't use my last name. My manager said, you know, don't use Torres. You know, let's use Magdalena, because Magdalena was vague enough and it would interest people to see where I'm from, what my background was from. And now that it's so popular to be Latino, like, oh, well, now you should use Torres. You should, well, espérate, at this point, I'm Deborah Magdalena. I'm not necessarily going to shift who I am. I've always been Deborah Magdalena. My parents named me that. So do you feel there is someone who's been asking a great question, and I was going to wait for the end, but I think now that we're talking about influences, I think, forgive me if I'm saying the wrong name, I think it's Merari Hall.
Yes.
I guess you know Merari?
No, but I've been reading the questions, and I'm so happy that you've opened that because it's important what she asked.
So, and I think it is a really good segue, Aime, to ask you, you know, now that we've tapped a little bit on our influence, on our history. I really think this should be like a 4-hour show because there's so many history, right? But now that it's become so popular, ahora está todo bien hip, es el negro, mulato, Latinx. Do you think, or let me rephrase that. What's your take on people now maybe being prouder or using the whole label of Latinx because it's popular, yet possibly in the past they were trying to negate it or deny it? En otras palabras, ¿qué tú piensas ahora de las personas que están viendo ahora? Antes no eran negros.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
Pero ahora son negrísimos.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, I think that depend of the education, no, that they receive in their homes with their family, with their parents. And for example, my first big influence was my mother, because she was a great woman, a Black woman, but elegant, educated, intelligent, with wisdom, with ¿cómo se dice? Criterio. She was a teacher, and she learned me about the respect for our races, for our mix, for our integration, for our, ¿cómo se dice? Aceptación.
Yeah, acceptance.
Yes. And she always said, you are Black and you have to be proud about that. And that is your difference. You are the mix of many races, but you have in advance that you can understand many things because you are in position to understand the discrimination, the not inclusion, the segregation, and at the same time, you have the rhythm, the savor, the music, the appearance of your races, and you have to be proud of all of that, no? And I feel that since desde ese momento, always I feel very proud about my race. But right. I know that some people before this explosion about the Latinx or Afro-Latina, they don't want to be part of this part, no, of our race, and it's sad because that is como una muestra de inseguridad o de.
Right. So it's a sign. It is sad. It is a sign of insecurity.
Yeah.
Well,
you're not being your authentic self. You never were your authentic self. If you're trying to deny one thing, or now you're trying to be something that you're not.
Lo que me molesta más es que yo no veo mucho avance. O sea, I can see more a chance. For example, in the television, in the Latin television in the United States, you never could be a Black en la pantalla de la televisión.
Yeah. We can follow up on that. That's important, right? That
is very important because
we still have representation.
No. Yo enciendo la televisión americana y veo negros, chinos, árabes, indios. Y no lo veo entre nosotros. Creo que tenemos que resolver primero ese problema.
Es que, Aime, me estás tirando. Like, really, you just made 5 different points that is so powerful that we can talk about, which is about we don't accept ourselves. So
exactly.
We can't deal with other people. So, Nestor, you wanted to touch on that real quickly on.
Well, yeah, it's by the way. By the way, Aime, that was Mera's question. She says hello. She says that you know her very well. I have to address it because I know someone specifically. I check them. You all check them all out, please. Her name is Marger. She's a lovely, very talented Venezuelan artist, and her image has been, with the straight hair, with her light skin, and she's wonderful. When the disturbances happened after Floyd incidents and so on, she took a very courageous step, and she came on Instagram and talked about her pain, about her experience from a Black family. I mean, she's light skinned, but her father is very much a dark skinned man. And in Venezuela, she had been dealing with that her whole life. And so she has now embarked upon a transformation in which she has now is allowing and celebrating her Blackness, her Afrocentricity. So, addressing the question, as to whether people that are not identified with being Black now because Black is hip, now they want to, of course, there will always be those opportunists on both ends, sides of the aisle, as it were. But I would say that more likely than not, those who are now stepping up or stepping in or forward to acknowledge and celebrate their Blackness or their Afrocentricity comes as a result of the fact that these conversations are being had, that maybe now there is an opportunity to really have these kinds of conversations, which leads me to Aime's point. And also leads me to the work. And preparing for this, I discovered the work of a wonderful scholar, Vanessa K. Valdez. She writes about a Puerto Rican Black Puerto Rican gentleman by the name of Arturo Alfonso Schoenberg. This is a Black man, Black Puerto Rican man that is a great scholar. They have libraries, City University of New York as a library to his name. Wonderful guy, too much stuff to go into right now. But he was dealing with the fact of, one thing is to be Black, but then it's another thing to be Black and Hispanic. And the layers that, Afro, Hispanics or, people have to deal with. It's not just the inherent racism, in mainland United States of America, but the racism within the Hispanic community. And mind you, the white Hispanics are prejudiced against within the mainstream America because they're Latinos, but then the Latino blancos, so it gets a very complicated, but I dare say that we're making, the very fact that we're having this conversation, we're making steps, taking steps forward.
I think we should have more, because that in itself, I mean, although it's all loaded, but I still want to give floor and room to our music. Which
yes.
Can I say something?
No, Milani, I actually wanted to follow up a little bit on what Aime and Nasser was saying, and on a question that we have on a chat. And I have a confession. I'm not really good with names sometimes, and I need glasses, so I am not sure if I'm mispronouncing your name. Forgive me, estoy como con los ojos así. I can't see the name. So I think it's Simon, S-Y-M-O-N, Simon. Forgive me if I said it wrong, but it's a really good question. They say that they are an African-American artist, and sometimes organizations or theaters or press always want them to reflect on what's their experience as being an artist, specifically an African-American artist. So I think we know the answer to this, but I would love for you to discuss a little bit about that, Omilani, as to, do you feel that as an Afro-Latinx artist that you are always asked, what is your experience, or what is a Latinx artist, or?
Especially now, and sometimes it gets a bit taxing because you don't know if like sometimes people exploit our identity, in order to, I don't know what. But I do want to say, though, regarding the previous subject too, is that we have to remember survival as well. In the past, there were people who didn't have options, but they had to identify particular ways, or you wouldn't be able to live your life's purpose. In today's time, we have more options, but we still have fight in order to have visibility. But to answer your question, yes, I think sometimes we are exploited, or sometimes, at least where I am, like with Latinegras and things like that, people will want the expertise, but they don't want to give value, So the minute that you say, well, you're consulting with me, shouldn't I charge a consulting fee? Then they don't want to do that. They want it for free and then I did not create the problem, so why must I solve the problem for other people? I have something to contribute. I can tell you my experience, but solving it takes more than just asking me, how do I feel about being oppressed?
Wow.
That was very good. Milani. Don't get it twisted. I told you she was a scholar.
She's wonderful. Absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Very profound.
So I want to thank the chats. And we're still going to wait a little bit towards the end for Q&A. So please bear with me, because there's some really important, great questions that I have lined up for our panel that I think you're all really going to enjoy. Because I think that we talked a little bit about Celia Cruz and her being the pioneer, and her, I know you know this so very well, right? This is something that we're being exploited now, like Omilani said, and the question that was posed, that now it's a fun and a cool thing to be. But I wonder, what do you think that our pioneers had that knew? Because La Celia was also dealing with La Negra Esa in Cuba. So she and Pipiru, there were so many pioneers that dealt with this when we didn't have the term Afro-Latinx, and we didn't have any of that. So I'm going to go back to you, Omilani. What do you think our pioneers possessed to get through and open the door for us?
It's the same thing that we have to have today. That is determination. Somebody will always tell you no, but you have to believe and understand that what you're doing is important. You also have to always keep the larger picture in mind. It's never about the moment. It's about those moments that come in the future.
Right. Do you want to expand on that, Nestor, and then I may?
Well, the first person that comes to mind is Alberto Socarrás.
Yes, thank
Alberto
you.
Socarrás was a true pioneer, an Afro-Cuban multi-instrumentalist, but focused on the flute. I was very privileged to take sight reading or solfège lessons with him right after I moved to New York. And he tells his story. You know, he moved from Cuba to New York in 1928, I think. And when I asked him about it, you know, he said, well, I decided that since being Black, since I was going to be suffer prejudice, so much prejudice as being a Black man, that I would rather be prejudiced against in a country that is not my own. So, you know, the pervasive racism in Cuba, which frankly speaking, con todo el amor de mi vida, todo el respeto, that I have been living in Miami for very many years, it's been fascinating that, you know, the racist tendencies of you know, is pretty strong. Let's just be diplomatic and say that racism does not only exist in the United States, but it's everywhere, really viciously.
Yes.
And it's inherently there. Ay, tú sabes lo que te digo, pero vaya, estamos en Miami, so tú sabes lo que es. But anyway, so Maestro Socarrás, you know, he had that clarity of vision. I am prejudiced against my Blackness in my country, I'm leaving. And then he went on to New York and he thrived in the Black communities, you know, during the Harlem Renaissance and playing with, you know, with the greatest artists. And he really was an amazing Black artist, aware of his Blackness, but he did not let that define him. And in fact, someone had talked about the whole European thing. Why don't we talk about European? Just like he already lost decades before, generations before, you know, Alberto Socarrás was bringing like ora staccato and classical works, you know, of the Western European tradition into pop music, into jazz during the 20s and 30s. So really, he really was able to thrive, you know, to survive, but to thrive, which in conclusion, I think that is a great testament ultimately to the amazing strength and the power of resilience, not just of people of color, but of the human spirit itself. And that is something that, because we're Black, we have the opportunity to really show that. And ultimately, the change has to come not from our definition of Blackness, but how do we transcend the definition imposed of us by the environment as being Black, and rather, you know, focus on our identity as human beings. A human being first, you know, artist or woman or man, and then Black, and then whatever nationality, but our humanity is really what defines and will define the future from here on.
Right. This is that's wonderful. Meg, you know, I want to piggyback what he said, because you both are classically trained musicians.
Yes.
Right. And so I remember Alberto Socarrás so vividly. I was a little girl. He was just such a class act. I mean, besides being brilliant, a class act. And so, and I know you studied, I mean, this extensive work that you've done classically. And so it was posed, you know, that sometimes also, because everybody has an opinion, that in the conversation of Afro-Latinx, we don't talk enough about our European heritage. And how much, you know, we don't talk about the influences that they had in our music. And I'm like, pero espérate un momentito, charanga, hello, right? How we have to, our ancestors at that time were forced to put down the drums because they were felt like it was intimidating, and they had to learn so they could entertain, tú sabes, la comida, la cena, to play the flute, to play the strings, to play the piano, and so on and so forth. So Aimee, can you share with us either your opinion, an anecdote, or an experience, or an artist that you admire that really propelled our music, because that's our music now, with the infusion of classical music?
Yes, of course. Yeah. In Cuba, we have many artists that prepare the way, no?
Yeah.
That we transited today. For example, the danzón is our national baile, no sé cómo se dice, dance.
Dance, our national.
The danzón is a genre of music, of Cuban music, that had the particularity of the composer or the musician, the arrangement, had take a little part of the classical music, the opera or a sonata, concert, and introduce in this popular formato of orchestra, like a charanga, for example. And this is the dance song. It's an instrumental genre. It's not for vocal. For vocal, it's danzonete. And that kind of, ¿cómo se dice, fusion of music, classical and popular, was very frequent in Cuba. All the great musicians, composers, and creatives that we have, Jorin, the cha-cha-cha, for example, mambo, song, dance song, they all was a person that had a classical formation,
right?
Classical knowledge, instructions, and they know about the particular, ¿cómo se dice? Docilidad. I don't know it in English.
About gentleness, is that, did I say that?
Yes, about our music, because the Cuban music is very fusionable. It's very docile. Half the part of Europe, principal Spain, but half the percussion or rhythm of Africans.
African and our Indian.
Yes, and Indians, yes, together. And China, because we have instruments. For example, la trompetica china that we use in la conga is from China. Los chinos la usaban para los entierros y los cubanos la cogimos para gozar.
¿Cómo fue? ¿Cómo fue? I didn't know that. Really? Los chinos lo usaban para los entierros.
Para los entierros.
Oh, that's fantastic. I have to translate. That is fantastic.
Y tenemos la mayoría de esos grandes músicos cubanos eran negros. Arsenio Rodríguez, Los Matamoros, Benny Moré, tenemos intérpretes como Mara Portuondo, como, ¿qué te puedo decir? La misma Celia, el mismo Tata Wine, que es un gran instrumentista nuestro que se proyectó al mundo entero.
You just dropped something so juicy that I have to make sure that everyone understood what you just said. Okay? I did not know that. Because, you know, a lot of people don't realize that, yes, there was Chinese slavery and you know, and immigrants and things. So there was a big colony in Cuba, and she's telling us that, you know, the traditional, you know, which is, now that I think about it, you're right. You know, Chinese, it's the part of their tradition to play the drums or some kind of percussion during funerals. And
sí, esto es una trompeta.
Cubans,
trompeta china. Sí.
That really is fantastic. It is. And then if you look at each island, and even in Latin America, I think it goes even further, because depending on what tribe landed there, depending on what other country colonized it more than the other, depending on you know, the Taino Indians, if you take the danzón, that's one sound. But you go to Haiti, you know, compa, that's another sound. You go to cumbia, lo mismo instrumento, another sound. El merengue, another sound. You know, so what do you guys think, if you had to choose 3 trends that came from either European and or our African ancestors, what 3 musical trends do you think dominate all of the Afro-Latino music? Because we haven't even gotten into reggaeton, hip hop, or the popular stuff now that still has the Afro, you know, influence. What 3 musical trends, but it could be an instrument, it could be a sound, a style, but what 3 do you think are the most concise in all of the subgenres that we have as Afro-Latinx artists?
The drums. The drums and percussion, rhythm. Is the one pervasive that has influenced just about every kind of music on the planet today.
The drums was created here in the United States because the black people, or the slaves in the United States, they can't introduce the tambor because don't allow. don tambor. Then they create the drums, and the drums influence all the popular music in the world.
Yes, pero when I talk, perdóname que interrumpa, I didn't mean to interrupt. When I mean drums in English, it refers to los tambores.
Oh,
so,
yeah, okay,
so
okay.
los tambores, yeah.
Okay.
And absolutely, no, so yeah, and you're absolutely right, and I'm sorry to interrupt it, you're right. The United States did not allow the drums, so they translated it, and that's where the blues and their vocal stuff came out.
Yes.
Pero a nosotros nos dejaron, en Caribe nos dejaron usar los tambores. That's what he wanted.
Yeah.
So
I would give a different answer.
23 genres, musical genres. Cuba, Brazil, and United States are the three very important countries that export rhythms and music to other countries in the world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Excellent question.
I would add an interesting instrument is the soul and the inflection of voice. Something about us as African diaspora people, when we sing, we don't sing rhythm and what we will do with the same melody. You know, you think about it even from the church. We don't sing This Little Light of Mine the same way you hear it. So the soul and the rhythm.
You don't sing, the Star Step Band, the anthem regularly. Yeah.
That's right. We put some soul in it.
Just, if anything, go online or YouTube to Melani's point and look at the Grammy performance of Aretha Franklin singing De Su Norma. Luciano Pavarotti got ill at the end. He was supposed to sing it. She was asked to sing De Su Norma. Just thinking about it, I get goosebumps. So absolutely, Melanie, you're absolutely on point on that.
I still have so many other questions, but our panel, our Q&A, which we're so excited, we've had a nice steady flow of questions. I want to give a shout out to Mo Bisley. I don't have time to ring that soliloquy he sent us because he is he's part of the Arsht fam and a brilliant producer and well-versed. I'm trying to see, especially now, Celia Cruz Anega Tumba, which is Black Lives Matter cry, if we really understand and make humanity. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out what no, in reggaeton, yeah. So, I do want to touch a little bit because first, let's take a deep breath and realize that this should be a series because there are so many things that we want to cover. And it is such a privilege to have you here and that the Arsht gave us this platform and that the heritage community put this together and that we have 100 people joining us today. There's just so much we cannot cover because this is a very multifaceted conversation and complex conversation. Because we are also African Americans, at least I would speak of myself, that I see myself in that experience. But because of the fact that we had the Spaniards, and that it's still so ingrained in our culture and our music, it's going to be difficult to cover so much. And because now under that label of Afro-Latinx, we're not just talking, like I said, danzón. Estamos hablando like maybe another different 100 easy subgenres that are under Afro-Latino. Easy, and I remember when there was a time when the whole urban Latino, that's another topic too, that we don't want to use that word anymore. Apparently some people are not comfortable with that, but with hip hop and reggaeton and hearing hip hop de España, the influence of the African-American hip hop that has had in Spain, it's just such a rich conversation. It really is. And I hope and wish that we can do this again on another day. But yes, I mean, we have like El General and all of these things. Now, Nestor, I will say, somebody's asking, what is your favorite? Oh, I'm going to leave that for a little bit. Aloha, Aime. We're looking forward to your show November 20th at the Arsht. Mira para allá.
Thank you. See.
I think, Nestor, what was the name of the Venezuelan artist that you were talking about?
Marger, Marger. Either Marger or Marger or Marger. Right. Marger, yes. Shout out to her. She's wonderful.
Yes. Yes, a series. I'm here for that. Yes, let's tell the world we need a series of doing that. Yeah, absolutely. We have shout outs from Central Florida. Las cara linda de mi gente negra. Ay, that's from Brass King. We love you, Brass King. Yes, what do you think about the best way? Here's a good question. What do you think is the best way for non-Black musicians to respectfully work with genres derived from the Afro-Latina experience? So in other words,
Repeat the question.
how do you think a non-Black, una persona que no sea necesariamente negra, how should they interpret, perform a piece that was known or done by a Black or Afro-Latino artist? How should they approach that?
Being themselves, is by being themselves, being influenced by. That's what we have done. We've taken European works and others, and we make it our own. And if anything, there's, I would imagine that you could find that Bob James is a phenomenal pianist, an iconic figure. He wrote the theme of Taxi and so many others. When the whole Black Lives Matter and George Floyd thing came out, he actually put on a live Facebook in which he says, Black Lives Matter to me. I was so moved. And he goes on to talk about how, as a white musician, that was so much in love and passionate about jazz, how he was embraced into the community, and how he stands on the shoulders of so many Black people. And so as long as you come from a place of genuine love and appreciation for the music, it's like, and I'll be as brief as I can. When people, classical trained people say, oh, how can I play jazz? I can never play jazz, or how can I play Latin music? Well, you cannot expect to play, like Latin music as a Latino, but you can play Latin music from where you come from. In other words, this is another story for another time. In a conference with Orlando Maraca Valle, a great flautist, as I was praising him, and somebody asked, how can you do that? And I basically said, all of us, each of us, we are who we are. We have what we have, and we do what we do with it. I am Puerto Rican, Melani's, with some Filipino infection, cultural. Aime is Cuban. Each of us are who we are. And, we have what we have, our talents, our experiences, and what we do with it is what we do. So whether you're white or yellow or green, you are who you are. And so with what you have, start from what you have and embrace who you really are. And from that place, then you can embrace and explore other influences and other idioms.
I wanted to just interject real quick. I agree with that. I mean, it is from where you're coming from. And I think for me, one of the biggest examples of that, and I encourage people to check it out, because we're not even talking about our Haitian brothers and sisters enough.
Absolutely. You're completely right.
You introduced me to Haitiando.
Oh, yeah.
I invite everyone to look up Haitiando, which is half the word of Haiti and half the word of Cubano. And it is a Cuban band or musicians doing Cuban standards.
No, Haitian musicians.
Haitian musicians performing Cuban standards in French.
Yeah. Yes.
And you want to talk about that is a perfect example for what Nestor just said, as to just approach it with exactly who you are. Nestor, someone just said that they love your new look. So I guess that they're happy with, like, the beard.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Music is the universal language. The music
Indeed it is
the universal language. Don't need explanation. Don't need that we have to be together or the same thing. No, everybody, como dice Néstor, si vas con la disposición de abrazar y de respetar y entender, you can understand and you can appreciate the value of the music.
Right.
Yes.
Eva's asking, what happened to Bola de Nieve?
Oh!
I'm sorry.
Bola de Nieve died many years ago, but was one of the great artists of my country. He was a very, very, very great pianist and interpreter. He was very, very black and very fat. Bola de nieve, look like,
So you
don't know.
play with the words. That's
Yes. But very different because he most to sing, he talk with the audience, with the people, and he had very, very, very beautiful songs, and he was a great, great, great pianist. Bola de nieve.
This is exciting. I'm getting questions everywhere, Black, you know, and this is, and we've got a steady crowd here. So Omilani, before, because I want to play a little game with you guys before we close. We have a little more time. So, you know, it was important for me during this talk that, yes, we did tap on the fact that, you know, the African diaspora is not only that of the African American, but is that of all of the Africans that were any land in the Western Hemisphere where our slaves landed. So that is Latin America, that is the United States, that is the Caribbean, and that we were able to somehow take our history and our Tainos and all of that, and we were so resilient that we turned it into music. And I think we continue to have some kind of struggle one way or another, especially within our own circle, you know, our own, like, you know, I had somebody share something with me, and they tagged me and some other Latinas and African-American women, and the young lady responded to this great article or great TV show. Her response was like, but I'm Latina. And then I go and I look at her picture, and she's got curly hair. Yo me acuerdo en Puerto Rico, y tu abuela, ¿dónde está? Right? So, también. So, that being said, let's talk a little bit about the hip hop struggle and the African American struggle, and about the commonality, the similarities that we do have. Because I think people focus too much more. We're here, we're there. We got a lot in common, and I think that hip hop has been one of those forces that I feel has helped us. And Omilani, correct me if I'm wrong. Where that's when in the '90s, you know, a lot of bad teenagers like this one was sent to Puerto Rico. So that's where we brought all the, you know, the West Coast sound and the hip hop started. Yet and still, someone like a Tego Calderon still has to fight for his blackness in a black music world. So please touch on the base of one, this two-part question. One, what did reggaeton do to the Afro-Latinx music movement? And two, did it still stay away from racism within our own race?
Ouch.
These are heavy questions that could be a topic within its own, but you touched on a lot of important things. The first thing, because we're talking about diaspora and you were talking about hip hop in the United States, first, it's important to know hip hop, like salsa, it came from, like, hip hop came from Puerto Rican and Black people who were from the Caribbean too. It was a diaspora music. So, I mean, we acknowledge the Blackness, you know, that came from the different sides, but it was definitely a fusion of our communities who lived with each other. So that's the reason why being Latinegra in Brooklyn was not anything special or different, because New York is like that. We live with each other. Now, when we're talking about reggaeton and all of these different things, music goes through transformations, right? So there was a time when they thought hip hop wouldn't survive. There was a time when there was a question of whether to include hip hop in awards categories or not, and things like that. And you mentioned artists like El General, who I don't know about as much, you know, in today's time, and Tego Calderon, who is still there in the community talking about La Perla. So some musics have come through, but now when you think of reggaeton, that's not who you think of. That is not even the vision of it, you know, where music has gone. Yes, there is invisibilization, but then we're also talking about male artists. I know I keep going to this subject, but there is an invisibilization of female artists too, because there are female artists involved in hip hop, like Ivy Queen, like You know, so many that, so we cannot forget the women who paved the way, who are also pushed down, down, down. If we're pushed down for being Black, the women take 5 steps backwards. So, you know, I think it's not just racism, but it is also the gender question as well.
Very, very, very deep, very important.
Yes,
very important.
I agree totally.
So heavy, it's so awesome.
Yes, indeed.
Awesome.
Yes, indeed.
There is one question from for Mr. Nestor Torres, and they addressed you as Mr. Nestor, and the question is from Jane Bragg. The question is, being an internationally recognized cultural and musical icon, do you find yourself ever having to reframe your Afrocentric background when traveling abroad? That actually is a really good question, you know.
Well, I
out to Japan and all of these
other well, no. The answer to that is no. And as I'm answering, it brings about a lot of internal questions as well. But, you know, what comes up for me right away for several reasons, strangely and weirdly to me, and to this day, I guess now as we're talking about it, you know, the senselessness, the irony, the ironic senselessness, and yes, let's call it stupidity of the fact that, oh, because I'm come from Puerto Rico, I'm not Black, I'm Hispanic. No, wait a minute. When I came from to Miami from New York, back in the early 80s, I went to get my driver's license, you know, and then, you know, in the driver's license, it says race, white. What? I know my grandparents. I know. Look at me. Look at my nose. And I'm white because I'm Latino. So, you know, in that sense, I have not, that was not an issue per se for me. And as I said earlier on, because of the way, you know, how I grew up and my background and so on. The second aspect of the negative of that answer is because, as I also mentioned earlier, I don't define myself as a Black man. I don't define myself as a Puerto Rican. I don't define myself as a musician or as a flautist. I define myself as a human being. You know, who am I? And Herbie Hancock, he really opened the door for me to really to look at it, you know, from that perspective. First and foremost, who am I as a human being? A white human being has certain privileges and things taken for granted, but he will experience fear when he sees aggressive Black people. A Black human being, you know, has innate fundamental rage within his life that he has to suppress his entire life because of the treatment that he has gone through because of a systemic, you know, situation. Right. But he's a human being, you know, and so we all have our challenges as human beings. So for me, I don't experience that, but you know, I'm proud of it.
Right. But just to cap it, because we have to unfortunately close, and everyone, including our audience members, I really think we should all kind of get together and see if we can do this quarterly or something, because the conversation is important and it is so multi-layered. And I think that what you're saying and what Omilani and I may have spoken, yes, we're human beings first, but all of our history and what we've gone through is very different. So to consider yourself even a human being first, you still need to unpack so many other experiences.
Exactly.
For some people, it's hard just for them to see themselves as
absolutely,
because you know
it's all inclusive. It's all inclusive. You're right.
Right. But I kind of would like to have fun before I give it back to Nicole, because I also want to, I asked the team to share with us a video as we close, and I want to thank the Arsht Center for inviting me to be part of this. I consider myself like their favorite bonus daughter or something. I just love it. I can't wait to go back in the theater and just be there and enjoy the great programming. But I kind of think I'd like to have a little fun with you guys, if that's okay.
Carry on.
I'm just going to do a quick, but here, before we do have fun, and I mean this, okay? You only have 10 seconds.
Yes.
So, 10 seconds.
Yeah, you're looking at me, sister. I know.
There's some people that are seeing you for the first time, so please share with us your social media, and if you have any important upcoming shows. So, Omilani, where can everyone find you and find your information?
Omilani.com. Everything is there.
Simple. Aime.
AimeNubiola.com.
Perfect. And I guess they can see when your shows are coming up.
Aime with 2 E, And Viola with a V, small V.
Yeah, there you go. And Nestor?
Nestor Torres Official on Instagram and my official Facebook page. Me dressed up in blue playing the flute, which is just for traditions.
Yes, let's be specific because you're right. There was somebody who was an imposter, and I found out. And I was tagging an imposter as my cousin, my brother, and my cousins were doing the same thing. Pero espérate, si este tipo no es mi hermano. So,
yeah.
Official, and you got to do that. And thank you so very much. You guys are so wise.
Thank you.
Rich, and it's just we really should consider. I am going to say it out there public. Yeah, I'm going to consider trying to see how we can make this happen, or at least how I can be more proactive to get the Latinx voice out there. So here's a fun round before Nicole comes back. I am going to ask you a question, and we're going to go in order the way I introduced you, alphabetical order. So Aimee, tú me vas a contestar primero, then Nestor, and then Omilani. Okay, so if I ask you hot, cold, you have to tell me which one you prefer. Okay?
Okay.
La pregunta es, voy a decir dos palabras y tú me vas a decir cuál tú prefieres. Okay, so the order again is Aimee, Nestor, and Omilani. Ready?
Let's go.
All right, let's go. First round, Aimee, tostones o maduros?
Tostones.
Nestor? Nestor?
Oh, maduros.
¿Tostones o maduros? This is
Maduro.
Huh?
Maduro. Maduros o tostones de Goya.
There you go. Omilani?
Mofongo. Nah, I'm just Maduro.
Okay. Aimee, pernil o bacalao?
Pernil.
Nestor?
Bacalao.
Omilani?
Neither one of them. No me gusta.
Aimee, la Lupe o la Celia?
Oh.
Celia.
Okay, Nestor?
La Lupe.
Omi?
La reina Celia, por supuesto.
All right. Juan Gabriel o Rafael? Aimee?
Rafael.
Nestor? I know.
Because of my childhood, Rafael.
Yeah. Elmilani?
Wanga.
Oh, yeah. Juanga. Aimee, Tego o Calle 13?
Ooh.
Nestor?
Oh, man. Tego for the respect, Calle 13 for their courage.
Omilani?
Man, how can you do that? The same. Tego y, yeah.
Pizza o tacos?
Respect.
Tacos.
Pizza
Which
o
one?
tacos? Pizza
Tacos.
o tacos?
Tacos.
Omilani?
Tacos.
Tacos. Sneakers or boots?
Oof.
No.
And the last one is, if you had to describe yourself with one word, what would that be? Con una palabra nada más a describirte quién tú eres.
¿Quién yo soy?
Yeah, una palabra.
A Christian woman.
A Christian woman. Nestor?
Yes.
Servant.
Servant. Omilani?
Colorful.
Colorful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for being a part of this. I would love to invite Nicole, and I'd like to put my brother on the spot. There you are, Nicole. Is your watching us? Is your father here with us now?
Nicole?
Sorry, I was on mute. No, he didn't get to watch the whole thing because my mother had taken him out for a birthday dinner. So
Ooh, like
caught the beginning, but I'm going to definitely send them the recording.
Well,
Tell him.
put my brother on the spot and ask my brother to play him a little.
I was ready to play Happy Birthday for your father, but
Yes,
oh well.
happy birthday.
Oh, but he's gonna watch it. You can still play.
Okay. Happy birthday.
Hello.
Y cumpleaños.
Thank you so much.
Nuestros mayores.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Man, oh my goodness. This has been amazing. So much. Yes, this definitely needs to be its own series. On behalf of the Heritage Committee, Aimee, Omilani, Nestor, thank you all so much. Deborah, oh my goodness, the hostess with the mostest. I mean, you need to come back. Please, if you enjoyed this, tune in to the next Heritage Project conversation titled Black Perspectives on the Great White Way, where we will discuss where we will discuss the Black Broadway experience on November 18th at 5:30 p.m. RSVP, it will be in the chat below. We want to give a special thanks to Bank of America and Outclick Magazine for generously sponsoring the Heritage Project. Thank you to the caption crew for their captioning service. And if you enjoyed this conversation and want to see more, please consider donating to the Arsht Center's Miami Diaspora Fund, which exists to commission and present artists of color. Click the link in the chat, or you can text Heritage 2020 to 91999. Thank you again for joining us. We will see you on November 18th. And as we head out, we want to leave you with this powerful piece by Elizabeth Aceveda, Afro-Latina.
Gotta check it out.
Afro-Latina, camina conmigo, salsa swagger anywhere she go, como la negra tiene tumbao azúcar. Dance to the rhythm, beat the drums of my skin. Afro-descendant, the rhythms within. The first language I spoke was Spanish. Learn from lullabies whispered in my ear. My parents' tongue was a gift which I quickly forgot after realizing my peers did not understand it. They did not understand me. So I rejected habichuela and mango, much preferring Happy Meals and Big Macs. Straightening my hair in imitation of Barbie, I was embarrassed by my grandmother's colorful skirts and my mother's ebroki English, which cracked my pride when she spoke. So shit, I would poke fun at her myself, hoping to lessen the humiliation. Proud to call myself American, a citizen of this nation. I hated caramel colored skin. Curse God, I've been born the color of cinnamon, how quickly we forget where we come from. So remind me that I come from the Taínos of the Rio, the Aztec, the Mayan, los Incas, los Españoles con sus fincas buscando oro, and the Yoruba Africanos que con sus manos built a mundo nunca imaginado. I know I come from stolen gold, from cocoa, from sugarcane, the children of slaves and slave masters, a beautifully tragic mixture, a sancocho of erased history, and my memory can't seem to escape. The thought of lost lives and indigenous rape, a bittersweet bitterness, a feeling innate, the soul of a people past, present, and fate. Our stories cannot be checked into boxes. They are in the forgotten, the undocumented, the passed down spoonfuls of arroz con dulce at abuela's knee. They're the way our hips skip to the beat of cumbia, merengue, y salsa. They're in the bending and blending of backbones. We are deformed and reformed beings. It's in the sway of our song, the landscapes of our skirts, the azúcar beneath our tongues. We are the unforeseen children. We're not a cultural wedlock. Hair too kinky for Spain and too wavy for dreadlocks. So our palms tell the cuentos of many tierras. Read our lifeline, birth of intertwined moonbeams and starshine. We are every ocean crossed. North Star navigates our waters. Our bodies have been bridges. We are the sons and daughters. El destino de mi gente. Black, brown, beautiful. Viviremos para siempre. Afro-Latinos hasta la muerte.